introduce our speaker. This is Gogo today. I'm going to try to introduce you as best I can. Gogo will speak to us about understanding disease from an African spiritual healing perspective. Gogo Danzini is a preeminent and pioneering Sangoma who has successfully merged the sacredness and the tradition of Sangoma with a deeply entrenched spirituality and modern thinking. She is a celebrated Sangoma, life coach, African storyteller, spiritual teacher, writer, dancer, and facilitator. Teaching is at the heart of what Gogo Danero does. She is the resident Sangoma of the Fresh Breakfast Show, with a dedicated monthly slot every last Tuesday of the month on Metro FM. She found the heal to teaching listeners on African spirituality and philosophy. She is a regular on Radio 2000, where she interprets dreams for listeners. The best way to summarize her life's work is about inviting people to view life from a different perspective, to bring about changing people's outlook to allow for holistic healing. Gogo Danero brings creativity to facilitate safe learning spaces and processes of social change. Her work has seen her work through Stellenbosch University and Wits University, and she's a regular speaker at Wits, teaching medical students African healing practices. Gogo Danero also collaborates with government institutes, such as the Department of Judicial Affairs, to bring about a nuanced understanding of African spirituality and healing. She founded the Gogo Danero Institute of Spiritual Healing, where she trains healers and does public talks on the role of African spirituality in the 21st century, demystifying myths and stereotypes around ancestry. As such, the Institute is embedded in African ancestry and holds a belief that people who are connected to their ancestors are like trees with strong roots that possess a great wealth. I hope I've done some good justice. But thank you very much for your talk today.
Those who have done this work before me to come forward. Thokozani. Thokozani is a greeting that I use a lot, and it's so nice to see it trend because now everybody says #Thokozagogo, because it's a greeting that actually sees you not only as this physical form, but as an entity that works with an army of other entities. And it's a greeting that sees the divine in you before I see the human in you. So it's like namaste. And I begin my talks every time with music and with dancing, as I said, that it's not only Dineo or Gogo Dineo speaking, because where do I get such richness and knowledge and wisdom? Because we don't have any papers written about African healing. We don't have any medical journals documenting experiences and how healing occurs when people interact and work with African healing practices. We don't have anything really. Even when you look at what, on Google, you get very limited or distorted information about what this practice is about. So for me, singing and dancing is actually inviting those who know best than I do. A lot of times before I do this work, I do what I need to do, or I do my pathas, which is to ask them to walk ahead of me and in front of me. But I also do my own reading from the little work of people that have written, like Dr. V.O. Kiza from KZN, who's written about it, and other people. But I come on stage and the narrative kind of takes its own shape, because then I get led by those who've gifted me this gift to speak. Because I don't believe that it's my own intellect. Of course I'm intelligent. But I don't believe it's only my own intellect. I believe it's the divine wisdom of my ancestors that speak through me, and that's why this work has been so impactful over the years. I'm so excited and I feel privileged. So thank you so much. Look at how full this room is. It's just like, it's so exciting, because when we started speaking about this work, we wouldn't have people come through because of the stereotypes and the fears surrounding African healing. We drove in today at the gate and they were like, you guys are Sangomas? Oh, you look so good, you smell so good. Because there's still, I think, with what the Witchcraft Act did that was passed around the 1970s, it really demonized African healing practices, because I think its attempt was to regulate this whole thing of people being accused of witchcraft, but it put all of us under the same umbrella and under the same campus, because we were called witch doctors. And for me, in my language, you cannot put a witch and a healer in the same bracket, because a witch is one who is intentionally causing harm or destruction on one's life, and a healer is one who makes well that is not well. So, and we should also understand that I'm also doing my level best, because as I said, there's no one who's done this work before me who stands up and articulates this work in a language that the collective can understand. So sometimes English on its own is very limited in unpacking the depths of African healing. So if you find me in the middle of my talk, Ngoya is Zulu or Lesotho, it's because I don't know the words yet. They will come somewhere, somewhat, And sometimes I have to speak them in that way in order for me to find the most appropriate word in English without me actually distorting the context of what I'm trying to teach or speak to today. And as a healer, I always come into the spaces to share my own insights based on my own experiences, my own life personal experiences with the encounter of African spiritual healing, but the experiences in which I practice. I'm a full-time practicing Sangoma, so I work day in and day out with people who experience what is seen as medical conditions or medically diagnosed conditions that medicine on its own, or what we call allopathic medicine, has not aided their ailments. And I work in that space a lot, so I come with that richness and that experience. I don't sit here and I don't feel like an expert. And there's something with me about things of expertise, because I feel like I'm a student to my own work. I'm forever learning and innovating and changing, because as we understand that the human body has an entity that is always changing, which is which is energy, and that's spirit for a lot of people. It's called the spiritual element of the human being, that really we cannot box and contain. That as we grow into life and our environmental contexts and our social contexts change, we evolve, and then we experience nuances with the diseases that we human beings are encountering. So I speak from my own experiences. I'm not a mouthpiece for all traditional healers. I cannot be held accountable for everyone. You can only hold me accountable to what I'm saying and what I do as a practitioner. So, and I'm not even here to influence you or convert you to become a Sangoma, because if you've got a calling, you've got the calling, whether I'm gonna convert you or influence you. But I'm here to just drop some seeds that we can actually expand our thinking as practitioners. The memo I got is that some of you are lab scientists and some of you are students, but we all work in the medical field with the interest of actually making the body that is not well within the humans that we are serving. And I'm hoping that some of the things that I'm going to say today are going to share insights of some of the things that you are finding weird in your practice. Like, what's really wrong with this person? Because we're really struggling. Okay, are you with me?
Yes.
Good. So we're looking at really understanding disease from an African perspective, and for us is what is disease really? And I use a lot of pictures because there's something about a picture that speaks 1,000 words, like a Chinese proverb has said. Kulupegizitosia, that's his picture when he was in training. He sees himself in that position, he starts to bear. And burping is an interesting thing because medically we can look at it as indigestion. as a stomach acid or whatever it is, but to us it's not like that, because for us burping is a connecting energy. So when somebody is resonating or connecting to something in which the energy or the beingness, which I call spirit, I'm gonna interchange those two words, energy and spirit, today, they burp, right? So I used to work for a small company, and when we had meetings, they would watch for my babes to get to like, oh, are the ancestors agreeing, Gogo, so can we work with this? So that's what burp, but sometimes it is indigestion, but in our work it's not just like that, which speaks to why when we look at disease, we look at what is not at ease within you, because we don't look at disease just as symptoms that are appearing and symptoms that need to be addressed, but we dig deeper, because we understand as African healers that your incremental part of you is your spiritual side. You know, when I got introduced, they said, I believe the philosophy of my work is that those who are spiritually rooted have the ability to thrive. And that's what I've seen in the work that I do, that people who are spiritually rooted in their ancestry and in themselves, I have the ability to thrive. So when we look at the whole thing of disease, we continuously as practitioners, and maybe let me take a step back, and sometimes I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I need to remember I'm speaking to new audiences all the time. And I'll speak to these things, repeating them until to a point where they become so obvious. Like when you speak about a medical doctor, people get it. When you speak about a psychiatrist, people get it. When you speak about a dietitian. So unfortunately for us, we haven't really gotten it. So there are different types of African healers, African spiritual healers. And I move from the word traditional healers. And the reason being, because for me, yes, this work is embedded in some tradition and cultural practices. But when we look at tradition, similarly when we look at religion, some things kind of get cast in stone that as we evolve and modernize, and I don't mean westernize, but modernize, because to be modern is to be here in this time. And in this moment is that we tend to want to hold on to an old practice that we're not even paying attention that it's actually not enabling any healing in the patients that we are working with. So when I speak about African spiritual healers, it's because as spiritual healers, it means that we pay attention to the now. As much as we understand that your history plays a role, this is because when we look at disease, we also look at family pathologies and historical imbalances that have happened in your families that have led to what you're experiencing right now. So when we look at those things, but we're also looking at you in this time, in 2019, what's going on with you, as much as the root cause could be what your grandmother did not honor in 1907. You get what I'm saying? But how is that manifesting for you now, and how do we aid you now, but without, isolating that past? So tradition might want to just focus on that aspect only, and this is the only way, but we're looking at you right now, and we might be saying that your forefathers never really acknowledged their own ancestral lineages, so they never did any rituals, and the ancestors are not appeased with you, so you need to slaughter a cow. But how then do you slaughter a cow if you're staying in a flat? Right? It might be an impractical thing. But when you look at a spiritual healer, we then tend to look at what is the essence of actually slaughtering a cow. It's not about the cow. The cow is the tool, but there are many tools that which can connect one to their ancestors, like impepo, like a slave, like a manzi. Those things can also be used as a tool, and maybe we don't have the means also, the financial means to buy a cow and we live in this big place. But maybe there's something else we can give as an offering to the ancestors. So that's what I mean by spiritual healers, is that we also tend to pay attention to the now and to this moment. So there are different types. The one that I am is called the Sangoma, and that's the one that's kind of trending, because now, because we smell so good and we look so good, everybody wants to be a Sangoma. I just came back from Lumfana University in Germany, and this woman said, Gogo, I dream of snakes. I think I've got the calling, So does it mean I can sign up to your institute to become a Sangoma? So a Sangoma is one who is called into this work by those who've had the gift in their family lineage, whether blood related or other ways of relation. So this is a calling. So you have to be entrusted with this gift, and trust. I've been practicing since 2010 as a Sangoma. I understand why it's a calling, because we are working with spiritual entities that you cannot see. So these are, it's even with the microscope, you can't look at them, and like I see the atomic molecules coming together. It's something that requires you as the gifted one to let go of some of your own thinking and limiting. There's so much that there's so much detachment that needs to occur in order for spirit to lead you in this world. So Sangomas are interconnectors between us, the living, and those who have passed on, which we call our ancestors. Then there's Izinyanga, whom are known for understanding and deeply being invested in understanding the medicines that we use. Well, the traditional medicines of the herbs, the roots, the fats that we use to aid aliments. And then there's also midwifery that happens. So those specialize in making sure that conception happens all right, the pregnancy is carried through full term well, but you are able to also deliver a healthy baby. And most of them, of course, they are not. It's more midwifery than gynecology, because they don't perform any surgeries, but they make sure that they prepare the mother to give natural birth. And then there's also traditional surgeons who are used a lot of times when there is initiation schools during you see, sometimes I have to say it for me to make sense. So those are the different types, and I'm sure there's other types, because even in being a Sangoma, there is different types and there's different specialities that one gets called to do. So, for example, for me, I do not treat children, because there are elements that children experience that requires a Sangoma that a medical practitioner cannot necessarily deal with. So I'll give an example. Inyoni. Has anybody heard of Inyoni? Klokhwana? Yes, right? So those are the terms that we use, but the symptoms that a child can present to you could also be very like extreme colic symptoms, like restlessness, unable to sleep, poor digestive systems. So they require somebody who works with children to facilitate certain things for that child to be settled, because this is where it all begins for us as Africans. So the importance of really connecting with our spiritual roots. So like a tree, no tree can bear fruit or can thrive and give us what a tree can necessarily give us if it's not deeply connected. So similarly, as African healing practitioners, we know we don't believe. I was saying today, because I encountered an experience which I'll share later on my way here, to say, I've grown not to believe anymore, because this work, whether you believe in it or you don't, does not mean it does not exist. Because we should also understand, when religion came into play and everything that was African got demonized, they made it a lot around belief system, versus actually these things do work, irrespective of whether we believe in them or not. Ask the people who believed in something else and came knocking at a Sangoma's door and they found help. So it begins with connectedness, because when we are connected to the spirit, which is the essence of who we are, we know that we are able to actually thrive in ways that we are unable to thrive. So for us as Africans, Umsamo is our first place of connection. What is Umsamo? In English, we call it a shrine, an altar, a sacred place where we actually commune. Some people have a room in their house. Everyone, irrespective of what your identity is, but the fact that you are keeping some things of your loved ones who passed over, there's a bit of Umsamo for it, right? So you are keeping things aside, or you've got a place where you light a candle for them. So Umsamo is that place where we believe as Africans that only the body dies, but the spirit transcends. That's why a lot of people would want to live a moral life, because they want to be an ancestor. Because when we die, what happens to us? The energy continues, it transforms, it never gets destroyed. So the energy goes and rejoins other energies and becomes one with what we call the divine energy, which people people of believers might call it God, Unkulunkulu, Umvelingangi, Allah, whatever, that energy force is, it becomes one. So we believe that when we connect it to divine energy and divine source, then we are able to be in creation and be able to create wellness in our life, because disease is not only about what is wrong at a biological level, but what is not well within yourself. Are we following me? Serious. So it begins with that connection. So from a day one is born, has to be announced to the ancestors. Emsamo.
Some people experience diseases right now because they were not connected, because it's a transition. Even in the medical world, we speak about it that, it's a bit of a traumatic experience for this being that has been safely secured in the womb for 9 months, and the next thing, pull out, or with the Caesar out, and they have to, it's rough, guys. There's been some research done about the trauma of actually birth, childbirth to the child itself. I'm not going to speak to that because I'm not doing that research, so don't ask me the question later about how that works. So it is a traumatic experience. So when they arrive, we need to announce them into a sacred space to help them arrive and align in the body in which they have formulated into. So when Mtwana figure ekaya, there are rituals that are performed that announces the child to say, do not be surprised, and it's to make sure that this child can actually be in synergy with the other human entities that exist in that home space. And it's to also ensure that this child can have less be impacted by the toxicity of the environment in which they are coming from. And remember, just because you don't believe in this doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? Because at the end of the day, the essence of this child is energy. And if the energy is not grounded and settled and rooted, then it becomes vulnerable to all sorts of other things. So, how do we then get to understanding what is ease or what is not at ease within the human system? African healing practitioners, our work is to listen. If you look at this picture, looks interesting, né? Like we are all, because we listen. We listen to spirit. We don't listen to you saying, I've got a headache, it's a migraine. We listen to what is the real cause of that headache, because there could be multiple factors of the headache. One, it could be that you're stressing. But why are you stressing? Because of being overworked and underpaid. But why are you being overworked? A lot of us are like, God has preached. But we're finding ourselves in, there are socio-economical issues with the country that a lot of us are earning less than we're not earning. We are not going to deny those social injustices issues, but you find people whom are in a workspace where their work is a lead, where we've got very few professionals doing it. So actually, you going into that profession, you should be man-hunted or human-hunted. Head-hunted for it. But you are not. And here you are. I had somebody yesterday come in and say, Gogo, I'm a qualified HR professional, but I'm actually transporting kids for school because I can never seem to find work. That sounds like, and of course she's going to have a migraine. Because every month she has to think about, where am I going to find food for my kids? How am I going to pay for this bill? And yes, we can look at it as, no, but there's very little employment in this country. However, there are other aspects that comes at play for other people. Because when we listen to spirit, we listen to, yes, the headache is a symptom, but there's something deeply underlying with the patient that is actually causing the disease as it manifests as a headache, but the disease is not the headache. So when we look at what is not well with this person, and when I said, but you guys have never performed any rituals, because for us to listen is to understand what are the rituals or what are the pathways in which one needs to be connected so that one can be in flow. Because a spiritual entity that is not fed is a spiritual entity dried up well that really cannot bear any fruit. So when we looked at it, because we are not just looking at like, oh yeah, it is, take the powder for the headache. That can help them aid the headache at that particular time. But we are trying to eradicate the headache altogether. And by eradicating the headache altogether, it's not only by just giving that medicine, by trying to resolve the things at the root of it. So you would find, so when we listen, you listen to somebody who has fertility issues, but there's nothing medically wrong with them because they've run all the tests with the doctors. They actually are supposed to be, and then they go to another gynecologist and be like, no, but you see your hormones, and then they go to another one, no, but you are not able to carry fruit because your uterus is, thinly lined, and there's those things. But the minute there's multiple versions to the story of the diagnosis, you know that something is amiss. So somebody whom did not begin at the first picture, where they were deeply rooted, to their ancestors becomes an entity unknown, floating wherever that is floating. So sometimes people have fertility issues because they're saying, your ancestors, like, who are you, by the way? So if you're unknown, you're going to be bearing unknowns that will yield unknowingness and unwellness in their lives. So sometimes people require those things. You find that people have fibroids and cysts, and they've been to repeated, like they've had repeated surgeries, but they keep on recurring. And sometimes when it recurs, because the womb for us as spiritual healers is where we carry a lot of energy. I mean, for those who know about chakras, they'll know what I'm talking about this, the center of the space, where we carry a lot of energy. And for people who have what we call the calling to become African healers, they carry a lot of the energy right there. I'll say to somebody, how are you able to give birth to life if you haven't given yourself life? Because one who denies what they are here to do or serve is one really denying themselves a life. Because, I mean, and it has nothing, it's not only about spiritual healers, because I know that all of us are here because there's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why we're here. And some of us get into professions because at the time that's the bursary we could have gotten, but it's not an interest in which we are being directed to. Or some of us get into a profession. I was told to become, I wanted to be a chemical analyst when I grew up. And I moved from chemistry to become an environmentalist because I loved environment. But I moved from one to the other, and I realized that actually I'm a passionate artist. You know, I love creative expression. But I was told that, no, you're too intelligent for those things. No, be an engineer, be those things. You know, we're looking for a lot of black female engineers. I never became any of those things because the calling got me at the age of 18 when I started to lose my mind. And this is what happens, and which is very important for all of us who are healing, because we are in the field to heal, right? We are in the field to make well. That we listen to deeply what is wrong, and sometimes it's not coming from this is to you who are in the field of healing practices, outside African healing practices. Listen to the patient outside what they're just telling you. We are all given something inside of us that gives us a feeling. Some people say it's a feeling, and sometimes scientists will be like, but this feeling, where's the probability and the whatever, you know, you want plausible effect and stuff like that. I was almost going that route of the plausible effect. And I still work with the plausible effect because as somebody with Western education, it has been both a gift and a curse to be questioning things, because sometimes you even question the obvious. But sometimes the questioning yields to the deeper understanding of why we do things the way we do as African healing practitioners. So it hasn't really been altogether a case, but sometimes I find myself being trapped in seeking proof where I can evidently see the proof, it's just that the proof is not tangible. So when we listen to patients and they're telling us their stories, let's listen to the words that they're not saying. Because sometimes somebody says something, but they're struggling because language is an issue. And it's not about English and vernacular here, but it's just the terms we use as medical practitioners. So in African healing cities, so that's to treat, right? But somebody can say, no, they are curing me of HIV. So as a medical practitioner, they're like, hell no, there's no cure. We all know at the moment there is no cure, but there are many ways to treat somebody with a chronic ailment. And ARVs are not the only ones. Diet is another one. You know, there's multiple things that can be. So when I'm saying listen, I'm saying listen beyond what is the obvious for you when you're working with patients, especially when they're speaking to you that they're seeking other alternative healing practices, because somebody might have been led to that, you know, chronic medical condition because emsamo awenziwanga izinto eziright. You understand? So sometimes you could find that somebody was led into an experience or an encounter that led to a disease that looks so obvious to say that's why you did it. But the root cause of the behavior in which they became reckless or they didn't think of their own health wellness is backward at that picture of the root. Making sense? Yes. I want to go back to this picture. What do you see here?
Crazy days.
What are you seeing? You're not saying anything. I should freak out by that picture of that guy.
Which guy?
I wanna sing the song. Oh, Matinya, Ula Matinama.
Yemane Zulula Baba.
Kulabatinama.
Yemane Zulula Baba.
Watinya kulabatinama.
Yemane Zulula Baba.
Oh, Matinya kulabatinama.
Yemane Zulula Baba.
Matinya kulabatinama.
Yemane Zulula Baba.
Oh, Matinya kulabatinama.
Yemane Zulula Baba.
Oh, love, 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 love.
Yemane Zulula Baba.
Oh, love, love, love,
I stopped you a long time ago. I was feeling my tears coming. So, in the 90s, I started experiencing things that I couldn't really articulate, but I was experiencing them. So they were psychotic or psychiatric diseases that were coming. I was hearing voices, I was seeing things. I was fitting a lot or going into epileptic fits that I got diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. And I stayed at Tara for 6 months in Matric, and I was on medication for another 6 months post that. But it didn't go away, and nobody listened to what could be this beyond the obvious, that this looks like a psychotic or a psychiatric issue. And I think it's important, for me, that my hope is that this work does not end in talks, but it ends as a curriculum, so that those who are going through medical fields can understand that sometimes this is beyond the biology, but it's a spiritual thing. And the song we sing always makes me feel emotional, because even at home I was ridiculous, like no at church I was demonic possessed, and my mom is sitting in the room and she couldn't get it, because why all of a sudden I just go mad, I go crazy, I go down the street chasing my mom with a knife, I go sleep at the cemetery. That was mad. And you come from a community where being a black intelligent child is still a stigma, because some people are like, no, she's just too clever. Yes, we knew she was clever. Yeah, but when you become too clever, because I was just too clever, and I was at a private school where I got a bursary from, but I wasn't too clever, I was called, and nobody could identify that as a calling. Because it happened between the ages of 16, and the first time it happened, then at 17, just before I went to, around 16 and 17, before I got the 2-year scholarship to American school, my teachers came to see my mom to say she needs to ask me to come down on my studies, because something is just not right. I start now seeing things. Yeah, no, I was very smart. I mean, I would write chapters ahead of my teachers. I was sitting in class and like, that's not how it is. Hydrogen and oxygen is what? Water, but how did it get to water? So, but then you were seen as a troubling child who is just too smart for her own good. Plus, you're a woman. So there was a lot of other things. But actually, how I realized that I was called, because even post that the symptoms never went away. I was undiagnosed on the spot at a medical ward at Sunny Hill Hospital. On the moment the doctor looked at me and said, she doesn't have epilepsy. That's it. They put me off medication. No explanation. But did the symptoms go away? No. Are they away? No. But are they making me sick? No. Why is that? Let me tell you. So when I got diagnosed, they thought it was a medical thing. 2010, I was taking a group of people to the Origin Center, and a scientist spoke to us and said, as scientists, what we fail to understand is understand spiritual causes of diseases, that many of us misdiagnose patients when they are birthing into the calling. Because a lot of them birth into the calling by experiencing psychoticness. And I was in the back of the room, I cried on my own. Because the penny for the first time, even though I've been told by so many other people that I have a calling, I couldn't listen because I listened with the filter of, well, these things are not, they're demonized, right? They're not, and I was being told by my own people, but it took an Afrikaner white male to convince me that I had a calling. How unfortunate, but that's the reality in which we still are faced with. Until somebody refers you to me, who's a medical doctor, then are you able to listen to me that actually you do have a calling. Because we've got medical doctors who refer patients to us to say, we've been on this route and we have failed. I've got a young person who for the past, from actually high school to varsity, and he had to drop out of Wits because nothing was seeming to work, and she was moved from psychiatric hospital to another because she had extreme epilepsy where she would feed uncontrollably and roar like a lion, and it looked like a madness. But all she needed was for a Sangoma somebody to listen beyond the obvious. And this is what African healers do. We listen beyond the obvious. Even when somebody comes and you can tell, this is actually a medical thing. Actually, you need antibiotics right now, or you actually need ARVs, because even if it's the calling, transferring is not going to undo the HIV which you contracted. We can do that, but medical practitioners fail to do that because we're still seen as nothing or as alternative. But we should be primary, shouldn't we be? Because we're in an African continent. So it's a very sad reality that occurred, that I got it at that moment, that, oh my God. So my psychoticness, even still experience, then fast forward to 2010, that's when the message came that I had to go and initiate. And through initiation, I learned how to actually work with this psychotic, epileptic madness that came forward as madness, but it was actually voices of my ancestors trying to speak through me, and I was a channeler of divine wisdom. I was a channeler of messages. I was bringing healing through me. I was the chosen one. It's only through training that I recognize it as a gift, and the minute I started working with it as a gift, it no longer became a burden. So every morning when I wake up, I've got my own rituals. I sit in my bed for 5 minutes, do a bit of deep breath, a bit of meditation, and I scan myself. So when I wake up agitated, I know something in the environment I'm in is off. And indeed, I'll find it's off. So I'm not bipolar. I don't have extreme mood swings. I'm just an empath. I'm just a deeply connected person. So when I go outside, and the minute I can see it and work with it, it goes away. I'm still not bipolar. Then when I experience a sin, because I know who I am right now because I had to go through the process of initiation. So a lot of us, it's time to go. The ancestors want to know pictures, so unfortunately you will not see the last picture, but we can do it while I finish off the top. So mental psychoticness, it's another common element that we are all struggling to deal with. I mean, over the last few years, there's been high peaks of depression or suicide in the country. And I'm not saying every clinically diagnosed medical element has a spiritual element to it, but most likely that there is a spiritual element to it. Because some people who are deeply suppressed is those who need certain things and not necessarily initiate to become Sangoma, but need certain things to root and ground them. Because somebody will tell you, I don't know where I'm going, but they've got everything in their life. They don't know where they're going because something is not connected within them. I would say to people, you've got everything, but there's still an emptiness, and you are slightly depressed. And they're slightly depressed because something is empty, because they're not connected to their roots. They're not connected to a lineage which can help them flow. And remember, just because you don't believe in what I'm saying doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I said this to another guy yesterday at the health salon because I had to go be a real gogo this time and get it clear. And said just because we don't believe in these things, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Because I didn't believe in it, but I became a Sangoma irrespective. The calling didn't leave me or stop because my faith was not in it. I've come to a point where it's no longer about belief, but it's about knowing. And let me give you another example. On my way here, I was actually talking to your colleagues that on our way here, we had to, because we come from close to Cosmos City, so traffic is bad from the north to the south. And we went via Ondekas. And on our way on Ondekas, there was a scene And first, you know, as a South African, first as a South African, go like,
Spectator value.
is that a crime scene? Yes, because we live in a country where you have to be. And I looked because like something was pulling out of the car and this guy was running. But I noticed that he was running with a teaspoon. And I remember with my aunt, my uncle's wife who never wanted to take up the calling, always used to have feeds. And I remember they would put a spoon to block them from biting their tongue. So I said, stop on the side of the road. And it's traffic and it's busy, you know? So, Kuluye had to be a Michael Schumacher and cut on the side. And I went off and risking whatever that I was risking, but I trusted, I listened to spirit. And we stopped on the side of the road, and of course already bit his tongue, and the mother was crying because they were taking the mom to a hospital, probably with multiple medical condition, and the son was at the back seat, and this poor guy got hired for the day for transport. I was like, I don't know what to do. I said, breathe. And I said, give me water and snuff. And I said, what is his surname? And they gave me surname, and I started to pass out for the water, which is to call the powers forward to make the water healing. And the minute I passed out, he stopped fitting. He stopped fitting. And yes, as a scientist, you're like, yeah, but what's the evidence? It could have been that he was fitting for the 30 seconds, so on the 40th second of spare me the signs. This was somebody who was needing help at the time, and we stopped, and he started to come down. But we had to speak to him gently, because I said, please drink the water. And he started to drink the water, and he started to come. And this guy was crying, said, Ma, I don't know where you come from. I've never seen this guy like this in my entire life. And for me, was telling me that probably the mom's disease is what has not been at ease within the family, that the disease has been passed on from one generation to another, because no one was brave enough to take upon what the ancestors were asking them to do. Because some of those diseases that we look as family diseases, or they run, or hereditary diseases, some of them are spiritual. So who had epilepsy in your family? My mom had it, my grandmother had it, because none of them had the call. None of them actually embrace those things. I always say to people, if you are gifted with the ability to heal in the family and you close down the hospital, how then are you going to be well? Because the hospital is closed. So this guy, and then we attended, I don't know where it ended, right? But I had to come here because you guys were going to be waiting. You see, we are also doctors on the road. It's like, sorry, emergency. So it's, and for me, that was like, wow, I don't believe this work. I know in it because I see it. Even with that young woman who was referred to me by a doctor, she's now actually training and she's stabilized. She looks happier. Her family says, wow, she's at peace. Well, she's lost weight because training is hard, guys. Mm-hmm. Yes, she's lost weight. You lose a lot of weight when you go into training because it's intensive, but it's part of the intensity is to actually shred off whatever that doesn't serve you as much as you looked at it as it serves you. The diet we eat is very different. Because that also plays a role, the foods you eat, the rituals that you perform. So there's a lot, the medicine, the traditional medicine administered, there's a lot that comes into place that 45 minutes of a talk is not going to give you all of it, but it's going to give you a window and a glimpse into the work of African healing and how it works with diseases. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to go to healing through music and dance. When I spoke about music and dance, and when I said earlier on that I'm not actually just dancing because we love dancing, because we're like, oh, Africans love to dance. And you forget you've got African ancestry. Homona Lady just traced all of our roots back here. So excuse me if you still haven't gotten the memo that you are African. Because I'm like, oh, this is not for us, it's for the Africans. Until we come to my Numba, because things are falling apart. And you've got a great grandmother was a healer. Hey, rough guys. Because I was actually asked on Metro the other day that, but can white people be Sangoma? So before you ask me, let me answer you. So this is what happens. And I said, yes, because of our colonial and apartheid history, as black people, we are also very wary. Because now Sangomas look nice, they smell good. Everybody wants to be one. And we're also feeling like, can we just have something to our own? But at spirit level, remember, race, gender, those things don't exist. Spirit sees a servant and one who can actually be of service. So yes, you can be a Sangoma. Maybe your grandmother or your mother was raised by a nanny who lost their family and your family became their family and had a gift. So whom is that person going to pass the gift on? Mara, don't fabricate it next week. Like, oh, I can feel the spirit of my grandmother. something like that. And you see, the sayings that many are called and few are chosen. Because in order for you to go through the training of a Sangoma, it's indeed a calling because it's rough. It's boot camp on steroids. Because you have to shed off everything of who you are and what you know to go into a world of the unknown and surrender to what we call ancestors and spirit who don't come in written form, but it's only dreams in which you need to interpret. It's a bit of a difficult thing because we have no points of references, we have no examples to look for, we have no role models, but I'm trusting that in the next 20 to 50 years, that when our kids are called into these things, they can actually feel jubilation than embarrassment. And they can feel excited versus fear, because we are setting the trend of actually normalizing and restoring the dignity of African healing practices without making it the other thing, but realizing that it's got an incremental role to play. And a lot of us would be called in these modern times to become Sangomas because a lot of us have moved away from the rituals that we needed to be connected with. Some people Twasa, and not because they need to go through that initiation process, it's because the first Msam, where it all began, failed. And then as it goes on and on and on, it expands and it manifests itself as that, because your calling could be to reconnect your people and your own family back to the roots. So the power of music and dance as a healing form, because I spoke about a little bits and bits of things, and pardon me, like I said, it's going to be difficult to tell you everything in detail. But what music and dance does, especially for people who are feting, because it speaks to the soul that's unsettled. So because an epileptic fit for us, when somebody goes into that, we understand that somebody is coming forward. They have no body, the body in which that they have is my body. So the only way I can honor them is through these drums, because they understand sound and energy. Because remember, it's an energy, here's energy, like attracts like. And when that happens, and we start speaking to the drum and we start singing to the drum, there's a bit of calmness that occurs. Then we say, it's okay, you are here, we hear you. Speak to us, we're listening. Please remember, you have one body to live in right now. So make sure in how you are coming across, you are not as well disabling the very same body in which you're needing. Because ancestors also need to understand that they need us to fulfill their own purposes. So they can't go on destroying the physical body, but we need to also honor that they don't have the logical mind that we have operating in this level. That it's that. So that's what happens. So as you could see, I was actually at 7:02 and I was asked to bring all my healing tools or my consultation tools. That this work is moving beyond the Ndumba. So we're moving beyond just the heart and like, no, you have to come there, I don't do it anyway. It's moving because that's what I spoke earlier on in my introduction, to say our work, when I speak of spiritual healers, because traditionally somebody can say, it's wrong. Where is the Josie in the studio? Josie is with you all the time. My Josie as well are with me all the time. Because we have to be able to evolve to have this work remain relevant. Because partly the reason that it has failed to be what it is, our responsibility as Africans is that we have always get stuck onto the old ways of doing things and not recognizing that things are evolving, things are shifting. That's why we can have talks about it, that's why we can speak, but something we don't speak because there's a sacredness into it. As doctors, you've got your own codes. You've got your own language where when you speak to each other, the patient's looking like, what's going on? And I can't ask you as a patient, what does that? Because you're not allowed to. It's doctor's codes. So even with this work, we've got our own codes where we cannot share the details and the depths of things because it's for those who are only called, because we are jeopardizing the practice itself. And that's why I'm very worried when people document without understanding what they're documenting, because then when they share it in the mainstream, it's distorted. And it actually moves people further away than actually bringing people closer to African healing practices. I hope and I trust that the seeds that are planted can find some germination within you and can inspire you to listen as a practitioner beyond the obvious, beyond the medics, beyond the biology, because some things are bigger than that.
Thank you so much for a beautiful and enlightening talk. I really enjoyed it. I think there must be many questions.
Yes.
I have a question if I can start.
Yes.
The time frame between when you found out about your calling and when you accepted it, was it a long time? Was it a big struggle for you to accept it? Or?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how long was it? A few years?
So I think for me, when I knew I didn't know it was a calling, but I had a gift was at the age of 16 and I only initiated at 29. Right? It's a long time, and it's a long time that I'm grateful for, but yet it involved a lot of suffering because I struggled a lot. I struggled with my health, my physical health. I struggled with just social well-being. There was no sense of belonging anyway. I couldn't feel like I could belong. But I also struggled economically because I couldn't find a job. I couldn't finish. I couldn't go to varsity. There was just a lot. So it was a long time during the periods, but a long time with a lot of struggle and a lot of suffering. Things started to be aided when it first began, where I set the roots. When my dad, after I had a miscarriage, and my dad did Imbelego, which some of the people that you might be seeing actually need Imbelego. Imbelego, it's a ceremony where we actually connect you. It's a ritual that we connect you with your ancestors, and you get deeply rooted so that you can actually be a well-functioning human being. And when that thing happened, and for me, I didn't believe in these things at the time. Remember, I was still coming out of my Christian paradigm. But I remember when my dad did it, I felt pregnant again immediately. I was like, right? And then my husband proposed. I was like, oh, I never used to have steady relationship. Yes. And then I got a job. I was like, oh, man, there's something there. Then after that, it took me a while to accept that the calling, because that was something bigger than just in Belém, right? But I did, because I was either gonna go back to a mental institution, knowingly well that it's not a psychotic, it's just that it looked like a convenient, more accepted thing for somebody to be checked in, as much as people think it's taboo. But trust me, for a lot of us, it's easier for you to be diagnosed with a psychotic illness than be called a Sangoma at the time when I had it. Right? And my husband said, no, you're not going to that place. We know you have a calling, we're just going to go. And we found out, then I went and I trained. Yeah. Yes?
Does the calling always comes with disease? Like, do you have to be sick for you to recognize that you have a calling? Or is there other people who just don't get sick and just go straight?
So when I speak about disease, it's not what is not at ease. For us, we don't look only at what is the obvious, we don't look at physical ailments, biological illnesses or clinical illnesses, but your social well-being, you know, your financial well-being, because that can lead to something clinical. It can lead to depression, it can lead to somebody having mental breakdowns because they're feeling they're unable to thrive or be, you know, economically active. So the calling manifests in a lot of things. Some people struggle to have healthy relationships at all. I mean, we are seeing beautiful young people, blessed with all the things that you have been blessed with, but you still fail in relationships because you need to be rooted within that gift before you can actually thrive in other things. So it manifests in many things. I denied it because I wasn't bepping, and you've seen I haven't really bepped. I wasn't bepping, I wasn't skinny, because at the time, we always knew that the people who had the calling would have almost HIV related symptoms. They would lose weight, loss of appetite, and that's why even when HIV in the 80s came to light, it was a bit confusing for black people, because those also, the symptoms presented themselves. But I was bigger than this. I was at 42, I'm at 32 now. Right? I was at 42, I was in, the only thing I was just bananas in the head. But I was married, you know, there were things that already were happening in my life, but there was something unwell. I would go 3 days without talking to my kids, eating or bathing, and locking myself in the room crying. So it appears when you feel that something is not right and you've had a history of an unresolved pattern, that you've tried everything, maybe consult a Sangoma and see what is there. It doesn't mean you have a calling, but it might be that you need something spiritual to actually help you, bring you back to wellness, because the disease, what is not at ease with you, might be spiritual than, you know, what you think it is. Okay, I'm just looking at questions so I can take them at once. 1, 2, 3, okay.
Well, it was a wonderful talk. Thank you so much. So I'm actually a genetic counselor. I'm also a nurse. And I found that a lot of our patients are shy to tell us that they've been to a traditional healer, they've been to a Sangoma, or that they want to go. So how do we, like, what's our responsibility? You know, we in the medical profession, we work with doctors, counselors, scientists, Like, what's our role? What right do we have to kind of suggest? Do you know, like I'm a Western trained nurse.
Yeah.
And listening to you, like with our patients who have multiple miscarriages or who have psychiatric illness, I mean, I'm not sure that it's our role to address it. And if the patients do ask us, how should we respond?
Okay, I'll answer. Do you see how I was stepping? What's going on with you? There's a question here, and I'll take 3 questions and then I'll answer it.
Okay.
So I'm a medical doctor, and we used to have a doctor that we worked with. She was a doctor and a Sangoma, and
Yes.
so this was like at a big hospital where she was actually told to leave because of the things she would suggest. For example, she was working in a pediatric environment, and she'd suggest that this child needs the father in the name. So I think my question is very related to Merlin's, where how do you suggest we build the synergy between traditional healers and
Western practitioners, yeah.
You just spoke to what I was wanting to speak. So, but mine was related to the mothers that have, maybe I'll put it in Sisu, that, sometimes there are contrasts between the westernized medical profession and the African spiritual profession and treatments. For example, the example of Islambes. So we are told in medical school that we should discourage patients from taking Islambes based on the researches that have been done before, that that kind of medication will affect the pregnancy, will make it difficult for, will cause fetal distress, you have to rush the mothers to the hospital, to theatre and deliver them. Whereas, yes, also on the other, hand. So how do we synergize between the Western kind of treatment based and the African spirit? Because yes, it's true. If you talk to other mothers, they'll tell you, I took Islambes when I was pregnant with you, or I took for the rest of my pregnancy and I delivered you and you didn't have that, problem. But so there's a teaching.
So I get very skeptical of medical researches that are done with Sangomas and African healing practitioners, because I feel like as we speak and as is, we all have a bit of a back understanding of this thing, right? And as researchers, we cannot remove ourselves from this thing. I mean, I come from a background where we did a lot of research in the corporate space that I was doing, and I could see that how my own belief system and would limit how I'm hearing and listening to things. I spoke earlier on about language being an issue. So for me, we're already living with a very overly burdened health system. Where did they really do those case studies? I mean, I question. And how were they done? Whom did they speak to? Did they profile 10 pregnancy women? If I know how it's being done, because also you understand that there's a way in which medicines are harvested, they are kept well, they are drank well, because the patient has to drink them accordingly to the instruction that have been given to them. I wish I drank my father's Islambes because I had 4 cesareans, because my pelvic passage was not opening. And my understanding of Islambes is that it helps softens this part. And from the people that we've done, because it's not only Islambes, yeah, I understand. Kunokuthi bayakusila, balula isiso, ukuthi umntwana akhona ukuthena so that the baby can take. There's a lot of things that goes beyond Islambezo that makes sure and ensures that somebody has a healthy pregnancy. And if somebody has a healthy delivery, because I've given people izimbiza as Islambezo, and post-delivery, it has actually helped them recover very quickly. And it lessens the pain, because kunomuntu to matunga, it's an anti-inflammatory medicine, it's also anti-pain. And if you looked at some of the medical journals, it's been approved as a medicine like that. It's just, it depends on the dosage in which one uses. So we should not also, I'm not disputing it altogether, but let's not also look at other way that how we do research is very limited because of one of resources, and the system on its own is overburdened. You cannot interview 5 people who've drinking Slambezo and conclude that from Slambezo, therefore Slambezo is not good because there's been a fetal distress from Slambezo. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So yes. So, and whose responsibility is it to tell patients to go seek other alternative